When you think of a revolution, what comes to mind? Probably something loud, right? Violent explosions that change the world overnight. But what if the most effective kind of revolution was actually a quiet one? A slow, patient, and almost invisible reshaping of society, not from the streets, but from the inside out. Well, today we're diving into the story of the Fabian Society, a group of British intellectuals who wanted to do exactly that. This line right here comes from a stained glass window that was made to celebrate the society, and wow, does it capture their ambition. They didn't just want to reform the world, they wanted to remold it. You know, like a blacksmith hammering hot metal on an anvil, shaping it into their perfect form. I mean, talk about a bold mission statement. But if you look a little closer at that same window, you'll spot this small shield, and it shows a wolf in sheep's clothing. And yeah, that's not just some random decoration. It's basically a confession of their whole strategy. It hints at a group that totally understood the power of appearing harmless while pushing for a truly radical transformation. So who exactly were these people? All right, so let's rewind. Where did this all start? Well, the Fabian Society wasn't born out of some massive street protest. It actually started in a series of debates among friends who just believed there had to be a different way to achieve socialism. It all kicked off in 1883 with this little debating group. By January of '84, they had a name, the Fabian Society. And then just a few months later, a real heavyweight joins the group, someone who'd pretty much come to define them, the brilliant and, let's face it, pretty eccentric playwright George Bernard Shaw. So why Fabian? This is so important. The name is everything. It's a shout out to the Roman general Fabius Maximus, who had the nickname the Delayer. See, his strategy against Hannibal wasn't to meet him in one huge decisive battle. No way. His whole game plan was to wear him down with patient, persistent, small-scale attacks. And that right there perfectly sums up the Fabian philosophy. Don't go for a direct fight. Win through gradual, relentless pressure. And the people behind this? Oh, they were just as unique as their strategy. Co-founder Edith Nesbit described George Bernard Shaw as looking like a long corpse with dead white face, but then she adds, he was one of the most fascinating men I ever met. And that kind of paints a picture of the whole society, right? A group of really unconventional, totally captivating intellectuals. These were thinkers, writers, and debaters, not street fighters. Okay, so this brings us to the absolute core of their strategy, a tactic they called permeation. As one person at the time put it, they believed in mixing an ounce of theory with a ton of practice. And for them, that practice was all about influence. So here's the key thing to understand about permeation. It was not about getting the masses fired up. In fact, it was the total opposite. Their goal was to slowly, deliberately, and quietly infiltrate the existing power structures. We're talking government, the civil service, the universities, and just convert the influential people already in charge to their way of thinking. And this slide just lays it all out, right? You can see just how different they were. While other socialist groups like the Social Democratic Federation were out there using emotional speeches and getting into street brawls to rally the working class, the Fabians were at home, writing these super detailed, meticulously researched arguments aimed right at the intellectual elite. It was a battle of ideas, not a battle of fists. Their entire arsenal was made of paper and ink. They pumped out this constant stream of pamphlets on pretty much every social issue you can imagine. And we're not talking about just high-minded philosophy, but the real nitty-gritty stuff, like how to run municipal water supplies or proposals for a minimum wage, the actual building blocks of a welfare state. Their biggest hit was the 1889 collection Fabian Essays in Socialism, which basically became their manifesto. But the Fabians didn't just want to win arguments in pamphlets. They wanted to build actual institutions. And as luck would have it, a huge opportunity was right around the corner that would let them turn their ideas into actual bricks and mortar. And that opportunity, it came in the form of a check, a big one, £10,000 from a wealthy supporter named Henry Hutchinson. Now, you have to remember, back in the 1890s, that was an insane amount of money, and it came with a pretty simple instruction: use it for propaganda and socialism. So what do you do with all that cash? Well, if you're the Fabians, you don't throw a party. You found a university. In 1895, the London School of Economics was born. As co-founder Sidney Webb put it, the goal was to teach political economy on more modern and more socialist lines. This is next-level thinking, right? They weren't just writing pamphlets anymore. They were creating the very school that would train future generations of leaders. And just 5 years after that, they made another huge move. They were a key force at the 1900 meeting that created the Labor Representation Committee. And that committee, well, it would soon turn into something we all know today, the British Labour Party. They basically helped build the car that would drive their ideas straight into the halls of power.
But, it wasn't all smooth sailing, not by a long shot. The society's whole commitment to this quiet, top-down strategy caused some pretty serious disagreements and cracks in their own foundation. Yeah, not everyone was on board. You had famous figures like the novelist H.G. Wells who joined, but then he left in a huff, basically saying they needed to get out and inspire the masses. And then you had others, like G.D.H. Cole, who just broke away entirely. He really didn't trust the Fabians' love for a powerful central government. Instead, he promoted something called guild socialism, where workers themselves, organized in democratic guilds, would control industries, not the state. Their ideas also led them to some, let's just say, really controversial stances. Shaw and the Webbs actually pushed the society to support the Boer War. Their logic? A single, powerful British Empire would be a more efficient way to roll out socialist reforms across the globe. As you can imagine, this horrified other socialists who saw it as a total betrayal of anti-imperialist values. And this focus on efficiency above all else, well, it led them down an even darker road. In the 1930s, Sidney and Beatrice Webb developed this really disturbing admiration for Stalin's Soviet Russia. They kind of just ignored all the brutal realities of the regime and praised its so-called efficiency. For a lot of people on the British left, this was just a bridge too far. So, after all this, what's the final verdict? What is the ultimate legacy of the Fabian Society? By the middle of the 20th century, their influence definitely started to fade, but you could argue that in a lot of ways, their mission was already accomplished. Well, the society itself kind of faded out, and there are a few big reasons why. For one, the Labor Party, the thing they helped create, was now doing the job they'd set out to do. Plus, new economic ideas from people like John Maynard Keynes were stealing the spotlight. And maybe the biggest reason, their core ideas weren't radical anymore. The concept of a national welfare state, something they'd been pushing for decades, was actually becoming mainstream. They had won. But you can see their fingerprints all over modern Britain. I mean, look no further than the Labour Party's original constitution. It was Sidney Webb who personally wrote the famous Clause 4, which for over 75 years officially committed the party to the common ownership of the means of production. That's a fundamentally socialist vision. Their ideas didn't just win debates, they got written into the rule books. And that kind of leaves us with this huge, fascinating question, doesn't it? The Fabian Society itself might have faded away, but their strategy, that slow, patient permeation of society from the inside, it succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Their ideas are all around us in the modern welfare state. So it really makes you wonder, in the long run, is the quiet, gradual revolution the one that truly wins?